Okay, this is a sensitive topic and it's tricky.
Maybe you can give your definition of love, because love is in the air.
As far as advice I want to give for anyone listening who feels frustrated in not meeting their right matches, I would say shake things up. That's my job, to do my due diligence, to make sure that when I put my client on a date and setting them up with someone, the person on the other end has the same genuine goal, usually marriage and family. That my clients who come to me, most of them are looking to get married for the first time and have children.
Can you tell us about the challenges that you had to overcome?
I mean, there's a lot of hard work that goes into building your brand and making, your name.
Everybody, welcome to Be Yourself podcast, the podcast on expressing our true selves. Today I have a very special guest in Marni Kagan. She's a professional matchmaker from New York. Marni, hello, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
You're very much welcome. Today is a special day, Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. And I thought it's such a great coincidence that we are recording it today.
And discussing love.
Discussing love. Yeah, absolutely. How's your day started? Tell us a little bit about maybe a tradition of the Valentine's Day in your family.
To be totally frank, my husband and I have never been big Valentine's Day people. I think for reasons we can get into later, but in essence, I think you express your love for your partner, hopefully 365 days a year, and do kind, thoughtful things for them. But I think with my son, who's 8, we do a little bit extra for him on Valentine's Day. So last year I got him a cute little bowl that had hearts. It said, "I seriously love you." It was a cereal bowl, filled it with, pink and red M&Ms. Got him a card. This year we got some fun Valentine's Day cookies, and I'm going to pick up a few more things for him. So I think for my son, it's like a fun thing for the kids. They give each other Valentine's notes, I think, in school. But, for us, I genuinely feel that it's sweet to do Valentine's. I think especially when you're dating, when you're single and you're in the dating pool. But I think, I would assume many married couples will say, yeah, it's like a sweet holiday, but you don't need to go to town for this particular day.
This is actually really, really, like for me personally, something that I can resonate with, because this is especially much more beautiful when you express your love and make some gesture unexpectedly when you buy flowers or something.
I don't think any person would complain if their spouse wants to pick up a nice bouquet of flowers today or bring them some chocolates. It's certainly nice. Do I think you need to go out to a 5-star restaurant for a full sit-down dinner on Valentine's Day? I don't think that's necessary. I was just going to say, when people are single or newly dating, I think the gesture, and it could even be just a nice card where someone expresses their emotions and how much they care about the person, I think that goes a long way. I think, especially frankly for the women, if the guy gets a card and says, I'm so enjoying spending time with you, getting to know you, I think you're amazing. I think that's more meaningful than the chocolates, but or maybe in tandem with the chocolates. So I think when you're single or in a new relationship, I think there's a lot of stock put on this day, and I certainly understand that.
Yeah, I actually agree. But actually, you might put in much more work into coming up with perfect sign or words for a person than just buying maybe some generic gift. Marni, let's get into your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and how did you get into professional matchmaking in the first place?
Sure. So I started matchmaking professionally. It'll be 16 years this spring. So, but prior to that, I was an attorney. I practiced law for 10 years. And short story, I'll give you the abridged version, but a conversation about dating in New York with a friend, and just the challenges that are out there. And at the time, apps didn't exist, but the old school, Match.com kind of things were out there. And we were just having a conversation over dinner about the challenges, and even the challenges on online, and sometimes, the dishonesty and people misrepresenting themselves, and these are strangers, and, the pros and cons of the online dating site. And just a conversation with this friend, I said, I should start my own business. I feel like, I can improve upon everything that's out there. And it was not something that I had ever even really thought about before. And even when I said it, it was just like, thrown out there. And my friend looked at me and he said, Marni, you should do this. You're the one person I know who could do this. I always had a very diverse network of friends, very outgoing, meet people everywhere I go. And we then actually finished our dinner, not even continuing to talk about it. And the next day, when I was at my firm and thinking about it, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And that night, I literally went home and drew up a business plan. And I thought, if I'm going to do this, how would I do this? What do I know about dating in New York? What do I know about the apps, about how people want to, or at that time, the online, and how people want to meet each other? And from that moment, within 24 hours of the conversation to the dating, to the business plan, I really just stayed with me. Like, I'm going to do this. And a month later, I gave my notice at my law firm and I started my business. It really just I just felt like this is something I can do and I can do really well. And there's a need for this. And as I mentioned, that was 16 years ago.
Wow. So that was a love from first sight in terms of you in this profession.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just said it. When my friend said it, I thought he's right. I can do this. It's daunting to leave something, I went to law school. I practiced for 10 years. It's daunting to leave something you know. And I'll be honest, my family initially thought maybe I had lost my mind. They're like, you're going to leave the law, your area of expertise in the law and all the time you've put into that to start this business. And, what they didn't know as much, what I knew was there's a need for it. There's really a need, and I can get into why, and even maybe more so now because of the apps. There's a need for like the old school matchmaking. Yes. But I knew there was a need, and I knew that I was the person to do it. And so I think once they saw, wow, the business took off, I started to, have marriages and babies to my credit. And I had at one point, a large, a team of people working with me. I got on the news. I was in the newspaper. They said, oh, this business is going to stick. This is going somewhere. And again, that feels like forever ago. And of course, I had my own learning curve in the beginning, which we can get into. But I have never looked back. And I would tell anyone who's looking to start a new business, matchmaking or otherwise, to think it out and know the challenges and the space, but go for your dream. That's what I would say. It's a big step, but I think you're doing it. And when you start your own business, it can be daunting, but it's also so rewarding.
Absolutely. And it's so inspiring that, especially for such a high profile profession that you had, you were courageous enough to actually switch gears to almost something completely different, even though I do believe that your communication skills and network play to your advantage, but still there were so many things that were definitely new for you. Can you tell us about the challenges that you had to overcome as you were starting?
Sure. Well, I think like with any new business, there's a learning curve and learning just you wear every hat, right? You're the salesperson, you're the actual person doing the services, you're the bookkeeper, you're PR, you're everything. So I think there was a learning curve on that, and even just kind of getting my name out there. And I worked really, really hard to do that. When I look back at how I started my business, I mean, I was at everything I could possibly go to build my network. I would sometimes go to, 2 or 3 events in a given day, a birthday party, a charity event. I mean, literally 5 or 6 nights a week. I really, everywhere I went, I would, organically connect with people. I used to be in the Hamptons a lot, where a lot of single New Yorkers go. So I was always networking, which is part of building, any business relationships. But I also wanted people to know that I knew what I was, doing. I wrote a blog for many years. I had a radio program of my own for a while. I also threw my own events for many years. I mean, there's a lot of hard work that goes into building your brand and making, your name. But I'm lucky to say at this point, 16 years later, Yeah, it's so much word of mouth. I have former clients who send their friends, family members, colleagues to me. People find me more, which is really nice. I'm proud to, say I built a reputation in the space, and I just get, people who know me sending their most, loved ones and dear family members and friends to me.
So obviously you mentioned that the demand is there. It's through the roof and it's not going away regardless of how many dating apps there are. What is the common motivation for people seeking professional assistance in a pretty intimate area of their life? Let's talk about your audience a little bit.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. And I actually just saw that CBS did a segment on modern matchmaking, traditional matchmaking becoming even more in demand right now because of the app. So that was on CBS Morning just like the other day, yesterday. I think, they talked about it because the apps are great in theory. And I think people actually in reality meet their matches on the app. So, certainly there are couples who meet, but also in between, there's a lot of wasted time. There's a lot of misrepresentation. There's a lot of ghosting. There's a lot of bad behavior. There's a lot of scamming, even people have to be careful of. There are a lot of pitfalls to the app. So I never want to write them off entirely because I think if you use it wisely, certainly you could meet somebody through the apps, but I feel like you have to be kind of like a detective and you have to be really smart. Maybe that's speaking to someone before you meet them in person, doing some due diligence that way. So that's that. Why people come to me, I think often they've just kind of had it with the apps. Some of my clients have never been on the apps. I have a client, she's divorced, she's newly entering the dating space, and she's very private, and that's just not a space she wants to go into. Other people, they've been on the apps a long time, but they're just finding either one, they're seeing the same people, they're not having access to new people, or they don't like the process. They trust me to do my due diligence, and that's where I'm an entirely different experience than the apps. When I take on a client, I am finding people through my network. So often those connections are just, 1 or 2 degrees removed from from who I know, meaning it might be one of my closest friends, cousins, brothers who I'm telling them about, someone who's been a family friend, for decades, let's just say, or, someone, right now I'm setting up someone, I met his brother in my building. We got to talking and I thought he was great. He's engaged. And I said, do you or your fiance know anybody wonderful? They're a wonderful, adorable young couple. And he said, my brother. And I'm literally setting up his brother next meet. So those are very organic connections. And then I do my screening. I, vet out all the things that my clients would want to know in advance, which you don't get from the apps. There's a handful of pictures and minimal information about anybody on an app. I'm finding out, is there compatibility religiously, in observance level? Is there compatibility politically? It is a very charged political climate right now. And a lot of my clients don't want to get on a date if there's just, vastly different viewpoints and values. Yeah, no, and it's hard for people to kind of interrogate people on that in their first messaging on an app. It's heavy to talk about. But also some people want to know because they don't want to get on a date and then have that come up in their conversation and realize there's just a major disconnect there. So those are things I'm finding out. I think, my job is to screen for seriousness. How serious is this person about wanting to be in a committed relationship? There's a lot on the apps where people might put that they are, and in reality, they're looking for something else, maybe something casual, hooking up, who knows what their goals are, but they can say otherwise. But the reality is they're not looking for something serious. The people who come through me, my clients, the people I'm setting them up with, that's my job to do my due diligence to make sure that when I put my client on a date and setting them up with someone, the person on the other end has the same genuine goals, usually marriage and family. That's my clients who come to me. Most of them are looking to get married for the first time and have children. And that's really, what's driving them to connect with me and have them try something different because the apps or whatever else is not working for them.
So how do you actually uncover those hidden desires or characteristics? How do you sort of investigate this? It's actually pretty sensitive information, especially if the person doesn't know you. So how do you navigate through this?
That's a great question because it's true. I end up knowing my clients very well, but sometimes when I'm screening someone who's not a direct connection to me, it is a friend, brother, colleague, whomever. They are, new to me. I'm new to them, and I'm asking sometimes, personal questions. I talk to everyone, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes in a phone call before I even meet them to screen out the major stuff. And then if everything else seems to be on point, then I meet everyone for coffee. I meet everyone before I set them up with my client in person. So I'm not.
You don't do online thing, or do you?
No. I mean, if someone is a match or a potential match for my client, I meet that person for coffee and spend another hour in person talking a wide range of things, talking about a wide range of things. And sometimes, usually when I get to in-person meetings, it's a go. But sometimes there's something about them in person that I think this person is not going to be a fit for my client or vice versa. Sometimes in the course of our conversation, additional things come out. I happened not that long ago, I was meeting someone for one of my female clients. And then as I'm talking to him, I shifted gears. I said, you know what? The woman I was thinking of is not a great fit. I have someone else I think would be a better fit. And they ended up really hitting it off and actually dating for a few months. It didn't work out. That's the tough part of the job we can get to. But just his talking to him, his energy, the things we talked about, I just got a really better read for him in person. And I think it's really critical to meet everybody in person. So that is very important to me. And I can tell you that I already know someone is serious, even if they're not my client, if they're taking the time to talk to me on the phone, if they're taking the time to meet with me, in person over a coffee, then I know that's already a good, telltale sign. They're taking this seriously, because I've had the case in the past where guys I kind of knew, but not really socially, years ago. He said, Marni, you know me. Why do we need to meet for coffee? You know me. And I said, I don't know you. I know you socially from the Hamptons. I don't know anything about you. And his reluctance to do that, I went back to my client and I said, I don't think he's serious, because I'm willing to meet him on a Saturday or a Sunday after work. I'll come to his neighborhood. I'll make it as easy as possible. But the fact that he's not sure, because honestly, Sergey, most of the people say, Marni, I'm an open book. Ask me whatever it is you want to know. This is your business. I know your clients take this seriously. This is your job to find out. And that means even sometimes now I go into people's dating history. Tell me about, if they're divorced, what happened in your marriage, not to be nosy or prying. Or just if they'd had long-term relationships, sometimes they were engaged and that got called up. So I can understand what was right in that and what wasn't right. And when people, obviously my clients share their dating history, but the other person does too, they might tell me ultimately, you know what, this person was wonderful and lovely, but this is where we had a disconnect. And I might hear that and say, you know what, that's not a match for my client either, because of some differences, whatever that it might be. So I'm walking through, some, like you said, some sensitive topics. But everyone pretty much says, I'm an open book. This is your job. Ask me what you need to know. So I really don't find pushback. I mean, I'm not getting too personal, but I am finding out the things that my client would want to know. And likewise, they're finding out about my client. I'll tell people, ask me anything, things that are relevant to you. If there's any deal breakers for you, let's make sure we're all on the same page. So by the time two people meet, they have a lot of information about each other and why they would hit it off. And that's a big part of what I do, besides the empirical, age appropriate and, similar observance levels and politically aligned. Okay, great. There's a whole nother level of matching after that. We're going to get each other? This guy's very sporty and active. Is she active? They have a similar lifestyle. This woman is more cerebral and likes deep conversations. Is he going to be someone who would engage with her that way? And that's when I'm describing on both ends the reasons why I think these two would really connect and hit it off.
Can you break down the sequence for someone who might have never used the service that you're offering? What is the step-by-step process for a man, for example? Oh, he comes to you. Obviously you're talking, you're getting to know him. Are you then looking specifically for him, and then you're kind of meeting with women, or where do you have? Where's your database, not, I don't want to call it a database, but network. Is this all your personal network, or you can be looking for a woman also outside of your network according to like some criteria set by a man?
Sure. So when I take on a client, the first thing I would do with him is we do what I call my intake interview, which is, sounds very formal, but it's a very casual, relaxed meeting where we're just talking about his interests, things that he, learn a little bit, talk about his work, things he enjoys doing outside of work, talk about his family, and I get a sense of him just as a person. Then we cover the dating history and then what he's looking for as we go forward. So that gives me kind of a good understanding of my client to start. I work with my clients for a year, so I'm getting to know my clients very well from that point on. Sometimes the people who come to me as clients, I already know them really well. I've set them up before. They like the process. Now they want to see things on the other end of the other side. So we start with that meeting, and then during the course of the year, I'm finding appropriate matches for that person. And that means either in my current network and also searching. Everybody, it's a search. And that means tapping into the people I know. And I'm very lucky and proud to say that my network, will happily think of who they know from my clients, because they know they'll be in good hands, whoever they send to me to be set up. And they've had a positive experience, being set up by me, or they know someone who has. Quick aside, I've had therapists send clients to me because my clients have talked about me in like their therapy session, and they will tell, it's happened several times. I mean, my name is, if someone just reached out, they had someone talking very positively about me at a Shabbat dinner. I mean, so people, that really great word of mouth is very helpful because they can reach out to somebody. I reached out to a guy, I don't know, a couple of years ago. I set him up. He was now married. I said, would you have any friends just like you? Because if you were single, my client would be a match for this woman I was working with. And he said, yeah, I do. I have a great friend. He's single. Let me see if he's game. Set him up with my client. They are now married and have 2 boys. I mean, that is the process, but it's to me tapping into my network. I also do searches. I have what I call scouts. They're people who have full-time jobs, but they're just networkers, and they're, independent contractors, but they enjoy connecting in general. So they're not my employees, but they're my scouts, and they'll send people to me throughout the year. Hey, I met this great guy. I met this great girl. She's single. They want to be set up. And then occasionally I collaborate with other matchmakers. I have a few matchmakers that I've developed a really nice relationship, and we always are meeting, new people on our own. And sometimes I help them, they help me. So I'm utilizing every way I can to bring new people into my network. I don't advertise. So it really is personal connections and relationships. Occasionally I'll post on my social media, hey, I'm looking for someone wonderful who fits X, Y, and Z. I get 1 million responses that way. And I have a marriage that came from a post directly. I posted something and I got a response. And so I have a lot of connections on social media. So it's really tackling it in every which way I can to bring new people into the fold. Some people find me daily, and then I'm always finding people too. Oh, but I also want to answer part 2 of your question, because you asked me to walk you through what it looks like when I take on somebody. So I'm setting up my client throughout the year. We're having feedback. I set up drinks. I like drinks for a first date versus dinner for reasons that I didn't get into. But they're meeting for drinks, not coffee, not dinner. It's just a nice first date. We're talking about, after the date feedback. What did they like? Where did they feel like there was connection? Maybe what wasn't a fit? All that feedback is helpful. But I also want to add, part and parcel of what I do and what many matchmakers do is coaching. And that's throughout the year. And I really feel like everybody benefits from coaching. Even someone who's just an absolute rock star, wonderful person, socially charming and very savvy. I still feel everyone benefits from the feedback from the dates, the feedback from the observations that I notice as I get to know them. And that can be coaching. It can be in many forms. It can be, why are you picking the people you're picking, for example, right? If someone's been single X amount of years, they've had certain relationships, I know their relationship history we're talking about. Well, let's think about the choices you've made and the things you're putting emphasis on versus the things maybe you're not focusing on as much. So the coaching can be that. The coaching can be, how do you go into your date finding out what you want to know about this person sooner than later, being very mindful and intentional in your dating, but not interviewing. What are your goals for the dates? How to make the best of your dates? And even then, as the dating progresses, how do you know, and these are always tricky questions, to cut things off sooner than later if something's not right, if you're starting to see flags. A lot of people who've been in long relationships, they might, acknowledge there were flags they saw but chose to ignore, so that's part of like throughout the year. And in a lot of ways, my role really kicks in once I set my client up with someone they really like, because then we're talking about how do we, see if this person is the right person long term. And then we're talking about, the first fight. How did that go down? How did that person communicate? How did you resolve it together? What were their communication skills in a time when you were not seeing eye to eye? When are you meeting their families? Have you said I love you yet? Your first vacation together is right for potential. I remember a couple I set up, they're married and has two girls. Their first trip, they fought their first vacation. And I talked with my client after and I said, walk me through. And they were able to acknowledge where they both, could have been compromising. I mean, travel is compromise, right? It's not your way or the highway when you go away. And that's kind of emblematic of relationships and marriage. It's about compromise. And so, they've had many vacations since then that have gone beautifully. But those are all I think the challenges, in relationships.
Your services and your help and your assistance doesn't stop when the person gets into dating or even something more serious. You are helping throughout the year, which is really, really cool. And actually the fact that people are happily recommending you to their friends testifies to your professionalism as nothing else. So I think that this is the ultimate testimony that the person is a real professional. When friends and friends of friends just want you to set them up with the person who you have on your radar. I mean, this is simply awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. I will tell you, I don't have a website. I had a website up for almost 9 years. So, for 9 years, I had a site up. And then I took a brief time off when my son was younger, came back to matchmaking, and I didn't put it back up. And I was telling a matchmaker, she said, what's your site? And I said, I don't have one at this point. And she said, well, how do you bring people into the fold? Like, it blew her mind that there's no site, because a lot of people, people will find them and upload their information. And I said, it comes all through people I know. And I am very proud of that, because it is a testament that people I've set up, clients, people who know me, entrust their friends and family with me. So I have found I prefer it that way without the site, because anyone who comes to me usually knows someone I know in common. Not always. Someone might hear this podcast and reach out, and I might not have that, level of connection. But I think I appreciate that acknowledgement, because I've worked really hard to get to that point where, I've established my name in this space.
Let's talk about expectations. Expectations that your customers are walking into the cooperation with you. What are the expectations? Are the expectations always as high as they can get? And how do you navigate through that? Like everyone wants, from what I know about you, your clients, everyone wants to have serious relationship. But what if there is a bump in the road? Something happens. So maybe just a general advice on finding love in this 2024 new year, and how should they deal with expectations and maybe thinking that they don't have enough time left, because clock is ticking, all this stuff.
So that's a great question as well. I think that question may be answered on a few levels. As far as taking on someone and what their expectations are, as I mentioned, with any business, you have a learning curve. I think early on in my business, I didn't know sometimes this is very early, but who is the proper client and who isn't. And I think you become more tuned to identifying who you can work with successfully. So, for example,
You don't work with everyone, right?
I don't. I've turned people away sometimes. And I'll give you a perfect example. A little while back, a client I was working with had mentioned me to a friend of hers, and her friend reached out to want to work with me. And I was walking through what I do, explaining how I find the matches, how I do the setups. And I also mentioned the coaching. And I said, everyone benefits from the coaching. It is part and parcel of what we're doing. Of course, there are the setups, but I could set you up 1,000 times. But if there's something going wrong on a fundamental level, it's all for naught. You have to address whatever may be, preventing you from forming that like lasting connection. So she said, okay, I appreciate that, but I don't think I need the coaching. I just want access to your network. And I said, you know what, why don't you speak to a former client of mine who can, even though she already knew a current client of mine, but someone else who had success with me, who had some of her own, like, I need this, I don't need that. And we worked beautifully together. And she said, sure, I'll talk to your former client. So she spoke to my former client. Just instead of me telling her about myself, someone who worked with me could share the experience and what it was like to work with me. And she came back and she said, okay, well, she obviously sung your praises. She's so happy. But I still want to say, I don't think I need your coaching. And I said to her, you know what? And I'd already sent her my agreement. I have a basic agreement formalizing, our obligations to each other. And I said, you know what? I don't think we're going to be a match. And the client and the matchmaker have to be a match. So I think you're lovely. I wish you well. But I actively said this because already I knew going into it, the mindset is not right. And I happen to know, as I never mentioned to my client, I was in communication with her friend. It's totally confidential. I mean, this is a very private part of people's life. And I treat it like attorney-client. It's very private who comes to me. And I would never share that with anyone. It's very discreet and confidential. But she on her own told my client that we had been in communication and that I had turned her away, that I said I wasn't going to work with her. And she said she respected it. And she said my friend was very appreciative and respected that you said that, because I just thought that is already a flag to me where you're not going to have success. So I think when people come to me, their first mindset is there's something for me to learn about myself and how I'm dating. I don't have all the answers. Something I am doing may not be working. Yes, there is the other part of what I do and why they've come to me, to find appropriate matches and tap into my network and for me to do the search. But those things go hand in hand. I'm also screening them before they take them on as a client. As I take them on as a client, what are they looking for and what are they expecting? I found, that the people have very hard and fast empirical limitations on what they're looking for tend to not have as much success. Meaning, a woman who says he needs to be X height, right? She's 5'1", but she wants someone at least 6 feet tall and up.
It's a dangerous
really,
area.
and it's not uncommon, but I do think that women, especially in their 20s, I'll be honest, are very height focused. And then I think as maybe they're not finding the right qualities and the people they've been going out with, there's a flexibility that starts to kind of come in. Like, what really matters? Kindness, generosity, reliability. And as long as, I'm attracted to him and whatever the other qualities, you can be attracted if he's not 6 feet, But I took someone who, I think my third client was literally that scenario. And I wouldn't take that client now, because I would say to them, that's putting limitations on something that really is not the right. I think the bigger, net you cast, or, the more open-minded you are, it gives yourself the chance to find love. And I'm not talking about settling, and we can always get into that. But it's to say, oh, this is my age cutoff. This is my height expectation. Those are not what goes to making a happy marriage. I think that when people come to me, we have to focus on, what do you need? What is important for you to feel fulfilled and, challenged or cared for in your relationship? And those are the qualities that we're focusing on. So first of all, I want to make sure that their focus is grounded in the things that matter for a long-term relationship and a happy life with a partner. I think that they have to understand no one is perfect and everyone comes with all their wonderful qualities and also, their flaws. And I say to them, it's true. I mean, they have their own, and I always say, I'm sure you're wonderful. I'm just getting to know you, but no one's perfect. You're not perfect. And you can't expect perfection from your future partner. So I think it's understanding what's the most important, what do you need to have, and then being understanding that, there are going to be things I don't like long wish lists, that people put together. And already there's a problem. If there's like a checklist, I think you focus on the core things that need to be there. So there's that and expectations. I sometimes give my clients books to read that I think would help them. There's a great book that talks about, what people expect from their partner, what's realistic. Maybe Hollywood has created false expectations of the fairy tale happily ever after, and it's not real life. And real life is tricky. And as a couple, you face all things together. Family member gets sick, something happens, and you have to have more than just physical attraction and chemistry. You have to have like those things that at the foundation will help you weather those things in life. And that's real life. So when I talk about expectations, I want them to be excited. I want them to be, really over the moon about the person I'm setting them up with and who they start dating. You should never be settling up on X age. My clock is ticking. I just want to meet somebody. That's not what we're talking about. But you can be excited about someone who maybe in the past you kind of didn't consider because you had your focus on the wrong qualities.
What about marriage, though? I think from my layman standpoint, women might want to get married more than men. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do you manage instances where a man, he is open for a wide variety of possible scenarios long term, but he doesn't want to get married tomorrow, and a woman wants to get married. So how do you deal with this in scenarios of this kind?
So I would say, obviously in the pool of people at large, there may be women who never want to get married. They want to be happily involved. I set up a couple over a decade ago. They are not married. They live together. They moved out of New York together. I don't know if they'll ever get married, but they're very, very happy. I'm friends with them on Facebook. They travel the world together. So that's a couple I have that chose not to get married, but they are in a committed, relationship. And as I said, they live together and they've been together for 10 years. But most of the people who come to me often are looking for marriage. That tends and family. That's just the demographic that tends to find me. And so if my client is looking for marriage and family, and you're asking, yes, if the woman is in the situation where she's looking for it more immediately, and the guy is like someday down the road, yeah, that's differing timelines, and it is a challenge because especially in New York, where I'm based, I think there's such a large, quantity of wonderful, smart, kind, attractive women looking for a committed relationship. And the number of men, eligible guys that are looking for the same is less. I think Manhattan, and I think probably a lot of major cities, lend itself to a little bit of that Peter Pan syndrome among the men. It's unfortunate, but it's reality because, well, I'll speak to New York, especially like that other urban areas I think are similar. A lot of the guys, especially, they want to get grounded in their career. They have certain maybe benchmarks for themselves, even financially. They want to get on financially stable footing. There's an abundance of choices here, whether it's through the apps or just going out at night socially. And so I think for some men, this is a big problem. They don't choose because they have this world of options. And psychological studies have shown when you get too many choices, you have a harder time choosing and often don't choose. So I've had clients men who have said, I was a victim of that. I was the victim of the New York, bigger, better syndrome. So many choices, and I'm single at this point because I just never saw their own timeline, if they want to get married and have children. I think for those men, a lot of times that kind of dawns on them in their 40s. I think in their 30s, they're still kind of, sowing their oats and playing the field. So, but I think for the women, it's tricky. That's the reality of dating here. They have to weed out the guys who are time wasters, and I'm helping them do that. Or maybe they have similar goals, but not on the same time frame. And, I try and tell the women not to lead with that because no one wants to feel pressured from the get-go. This is my timeline, dating, engagement, marriage, family. I think that can be overwhelming to some men, to many men. And women,
Yeah.
you want to know that both parties are in it for the right reasons, and it's about you, not just like their objectives. But I think it's harder for women in general. I would say that's the case.
Do you facilitate open conversations between the two, or you get to know everything beforehand and then you set up the meeting for the suitable, in your opinion, people? Or do you somehow, is there ever a case where you are with the two people who you got to meet in one room?
That's a great question. No, but I am sometimes the mediator on the phone. I've never actually sat down and guided things in that way. But I will say that has happened where I'm able to smooth over some things. So, I do the research and due diligence before people in meeting, making sure they look exactly like their pictures. I'm very the lawyer in me, I'm very detail oriented and I like accurate representations. When people meet, they know exactly what each other look like. They have all the relevant facts going in. I don't share last names and where people work just out of privacy, basis, but usually they share it on their first date, and giving them a sense of shared interests, shared, values and so forth. Then they meet and things take off. Sometimes after a date, I speak to both parties after a date, and it might be all great, but I have this one question or one question mark. And sometimes I'm able to kind of just answer that and say, oh, I think that was a misunderstanding in that part of the conversation. That's actually, I know her and I know exactly what she meant by that, or I know him and that, not again to worry or focus on that. So sometimes it's as small as that. And then sometimes as people are dating, I do hear, even from not my clients, sometimes they'll reach out and say, I'm really enjoying getting to know so-and-so, but I'm wondering about this, or what do you think about that? And even though my allegiance is to my client, sometimes I do client-to-client setups. I only have 2 client-to-client marriages, so it's not a typical scenario. Usually one person is my client and the other person is in my network. That just tends to be the case. And but sometimes someone on the other side will reach out to me and I take it as a sign of they trust me. They want my guidance and I'm able to smooth things over. And even though they're not my client, it's another benefit I can add for my client because I can kind of be their voice, but not in an awkward situation. I don't know if I'm really articulating it very well, but I can remember a couple I set up and the guy was my client and the woman reached out because she had 1 or 2 questions. And at that point, they weren't dating long enough to, really go there in their conversation, but she wanted my input. And she said, I know I'm not your client, but I really appreciate your time. And I was able to talk to her about it and smooth over her concerns and, they continued to date. So I've never been, in the room navigating that, but I am a resource, obviously for my client throughout the year, but even on the other end.
In your 16 years experience, maybe I can ask you about your most memorable cases. You mentioned so many great outcomes for your clients. Maybe you can get a little bit more into your most memorable and great, I would say, case studies, maybe. Basically, people who are now married, happily married. And also the question, how did your approach evolved or changed over the years?
Okay, I'll take those separately. I'll start with the, case studies or whatnot. Yeah. I think one scenario, and I talk about this a lot because it really was so telling, was a couple that when I presented the guy to the woman, she initially said no. She said he's not really my type, and I knew her type. I knew her physical type was a certain look, and he wasn't that, but he was handsome. He was a quality guy. I had screened him, and she was kind of resistant. She was. And I had to really nudge her to go. And sometimes, my client says, I'm not feeling it. Okay, we move on. But I just felt in this instance, it was worth an hour and a half of her life to see. And because I knew her dating history, and I knew she dated X guy for a year or 2 who wasn't the best boyfriend and partner, and he wasn't, he was selfish and this and that, I kind of had to use that a little with her and say, look, you've given lesser guys more than an hour and a half of your life. And that just resonated with her for some reason, because I knew she'd wasted time with some people who were just not respectful of her and not great partners. So I said that to her and she finally, she agreed. And after the date, she had a really good time. She said, I'm so glad you nudged me. After the 3rd date, she said, I can't believe I even resisted, why didn't, and I said, but that's my job. That's my job, is to push you and consider, it's just a picture. And he's handsome and your type, I know your type, but it hasn't been working for you, right? And so, I mean, and they've been together over a decade and they're very happy. And so I'm very proud of that because I did nudge. I think what I've learned since I started this 16 years ago, I think in the beginning, I wanted every setup to be perfect, right? Like everything matching up to what my client said. And I wanted to be like, I'm very mindful. I'm not going to waste your time if there's some difference of whatever X is. And what I learned is you can't strive for these perfect setups because a lot of times everything on paper is there and there's no chemistry. And then there are some times where, you know what, there's enough good, it's worth seeing. This I'm not sure, but you know what, we'll see, let's see. And those maybes have just great chemistry and they take, those relationship takes. And so I think I was too much of a perfectionist at first and I learned you have to take chances. And so I'll tell my clients, these are all the things I love about this match for you. I'd love to see where you connect on this issue, but let's see, let's find out. And sometimes they'll come back and they'll say, great setup, totally see where you were going with this. I don't think we had that spark, but I enjoyed myself. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. But a lot of the maybes have been, I had an amazing time. I really would love to go out with this person again. So I have learned to not aim for the perfect setup because again, there is no perfect, although there's some that are very, very good. There are times I leave a screening for someone and I cannot wait to talk to my client. I'm literally calling them from the street. I can't wait to debrief you about this. You're going to love this person. And there's sometimes I really feel that. But a lot of times I'm like, this person is quality. You have so many reasons why you should hit it up and could it up. And the rest is chemistry. And that you can't really know. Once something's in the ballpark, it's about getting people together and finding that intangible, that spark.
Well, this really speaks to me a lot. I feel that a lot of times, especially when I'm 33 years old, and I am back and forth with Tinder. I install it and I delete it, and specifically for the reason that you outlined, that the things that people put on their profile is just so far away from the feel that I get from a one-on-one meeting, and I'm learning this from you right now, that even though this person might not be perfect for me from the appearance standpoint, I might still want to give her a chance. I had Mark Hershberg on my podcast, who's one of your clients.
Yes.
And
a friend, not a client, friend.
A friend, and yeah. He shared a very cool story because he's been on the dating market for quite some time. And he said that there was a lady that he's now dating. I'm guessing that's what he said, that at first it didn't seem like they would get anywhere. But he said that there was something in her that I wanted to explore, something interesting. And I think that was the case for the maybes that you mentioned, that he found something that was worth exploring, digging deeper. And he would just take his time and ask questions, and eventually it became like a very, very interesting conversation that resulted into them, I believe, getting together. So it's very, very interesting teaching moment for me and for maybe a lot of men listening.
Absolutely. And actually, I'll do one more case study. I remember a few years back, I set up a couple, and after the date, they both messaged me. I got her message first. And she said, thank you so much for the setup. He was super quality, everything you said. I doubt he'll want to go out again. We had some like lulls in the conversation, some like kind of awkward moments, but he was lovely and quality, and she thought he was handsome, but the date wasn't like seamless, So I was expecting him to say that he wasn't interested in going out again. He reached out to me and he said, I've been dating long enough. I have had better dates that are more like you meet and you feel like you know each other, from the get-go, like you've known each other forever, that kind of energy. He said there were some awkward, lulls. He said, but she was objectively cute. I enjoyed meeting her, and I'd love to see on day 2 where things could go. So I was so happy, she was my client at the time, to tell her, actually, he's up for a second date. And I love that she was like very pleasantly surprised. And I love that they were both open-minded to seeing, let's see where date 2 goes. Date 2 was great. Date 3 was great. It just got better and better. And I tell this story, they both thought each other was attractive. And I think that is important because when I say you got to give people the benefit of the doubt, I mean, you have to be attracted to your partner. And I think, frankly, if in this scenario, he didn't think she was like objectively cute, I don't know if it would have gone to date 2, but their connection wasn't like this seamless connection. But what he said was like, I've been dating long enough to know a first date is just a first date. And they're married with 2 boys. I was at their wedding. And I will tell you, I love to tell their story because sometimes I have an amazing first date that people come back and say it was seamless and no awkward, and I never get too excited about that either. That's great. I'm happy it was a great first date, but it's just a first date. And that could be over 2 dates from down the road. 3 dates, I've seen that happen. Amazing first date, 3 dates later, it's done. So I kind of like the slow and steady build and giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think sometimes in New York and probably elsewhere, there's this kind of like, wow me now, like wow me on this first date because I have another date lined up tomorrow. There's almost too much dating and comparing to people, and people like lose perspective. And I love that these 2 recognize all the great qualities in each other, but knew that, okay, it wasn't this like perfect date 1, but date 2 was great, 3, 4, and it built. And I think that there's something really special about that. So again, I'll go back to like this advice to keep an open mind and keep your perspective on like what matters. And even if you're thinking about your dates and Mark's example, it's like take the time to get to know more, like scratch the surface, and you could be really pleasantly surprised. Whereas you might have those instant chemistry dates, you scratch the surface, and then there's not enough there for the long term.
Obviously, you are incredibly passionate about what you do. And I think that for me, working with people who are looking for their first job, I always tell them, like, don't look at the salary offering, but look at how do you resonate, or how you, in terms of how do you feel at this job? Does it drive you? So obviously you're supremely passionate about what you do. I'm wondering, what are the things that you love most about your job? What are the things that just keep you getting up every morning and just keep doing what you're doing and becoming better and better? Because obviously you're one of the best at what you're doing, even without a website, having all this traction. So what keeps you going? What's your things that you love most?
The best part of the job, and it's probably obvious, but is when you're getting the call together, usually the couples, they just got engaged. I wish I could bottle that feeling. It is, I mean, after the parents, like I'm one of the first phone calls. And that's the reward. And then the next is, when they're calling me to say that they're expecting, that she's pregnant. I feel so excited. And I get all the holiday cards with the families and the babies. I call them Marni babies. But, that is just tangible stuff. I was at a wedding not that long ago. After the bride and groom were walking down the aisle, the groom high-fived me. I feel like so happy I was part of that. And it does drive me every day. I'm always meeting new people, and I'm a people person, so every new person that I'm meeting to screen for my client, I'm very lucky. I get to meet wonderful people, almost every day of the week. I'm meeting people for my clients. So that's the upside. It's just that I'm helping, as someone said just the other day, choosing your partner is probably, the most important decision you'll make in your life, who you're going to choose to marry and raise a family with. I can't think of too many other things that are more important. So my role in that, I feel very grateful to be part of.
And let me play a devil's advocate a little bit. What's your least favorite thing?
Well, I can say that when things don't work out, it breaks my heart. And I've had those calls too. And, you can't eliminate heartache in what I do. Unfortunately, it's part of life. It's part of relationships. And I wish I could eliminate that part of this process, but I've set people up. They're dating a year, whatever it is. You think engagement's the next step, and instead they're breaking up, and it's painful. As I think this as much for me as for my client. It's hard, So that part that's the hard part. It's just the emotional aspect. These are very personal relationships, and these are people's lives. And also, it's hard for me when I set up a couple, and maybe my client is interested, and the other person thinks they're nice and lovely, but not a match. I mean, that's disappointment. But I also tell my clients that's part of dating. No one is immune. At some point, everyone's on the other end of it. It's for both sides. And that is reality. And I can't create an alternate universe where no one, gets rejected or someone doesn't want to pursue things. But I always tell them, you just dust yourself off and you keep going. And that's it. I try and be a cheerleader for my clients and stay positive. I think that's half the battle. Your person is out there and it just takes one. So something didn't work out, take your time to yourself, regroup, and then go back.
I saw you recently took a poll among your followers on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it was on the account of if for women specifically, if they're okay if a new man greets her with a hug or a kiss. So I'm curious, and actually the response rate was very high. I got really excited by seeing how many active members you have in your network, in your community. That's another evidence that you keeping up with your network and not kind of losing it. So how often do you maybe improve on the basis of social some kind of polls or whatever it might be? How often do you do things like that just to get their opinion from your network?
Say every so often. I've been doing this long enough. I feel like I have a good read of things, but I am always kind of tapping into my network to see their take because things do change and evolve. I think the younger generation, like they don't want phone calls. They want you to text them. And I see that in the dating, I have a client who's a little bit older. He's always trying to get the women on the phone through the apps and he's going for a little bit younger and they don't want to talk, so that's like off-putting to them. So you have to kind of understand your audience and like the approach. But actually, that specific poll, one of my clients had sent me a video. There are these guys out there who have like dating tips for men, and they kind of like teach them how to be smooth and how to do this. And he had sent me a video where a guy was showing men how you go in for the kiss on greeting someone on a first date. And he sent it to me, and we were talking. I said he did it really smoothly, but I don't know if everyone wants that. Let me poll the people in my network because you're following this guy on YouTube that's telling you to do X, Y, and Z to be a smooth dater. But let's hear how the women really want to be approached. And I think that the result of those women, I have about 4,000 connections on Facebook, and I got a decent turnout, and they were saying it's very individual. And that's kind of what I'm always telling him, read people's body language. I've sent clients books on body language. It is so important when you're on a date to be attuned to your own body language and the body language of the person that you're out with. And so a lot of women don't want to be kissed, but especially if it's an app. They don't know you. That kind of physical contact is too much right away. But a lot of women commented, well, if we've been developing rapport before we've met, it might be okay. Or a hug, But so I think it's being a smart dater and understanding to pay attention to the woman you're with. And it's funny because I have a client who's dated a lot. He's new to me. I set him up. And then the woman said, well, he's obviously an inexperienced dater. And I went back to him and I told him that. I said, it's ironic because I know you're not. But some of these things that you're doing make it see that I think is very telling. So let's figure out what you're doing. For example, another thing I've pulled not on Facebook, but just through my network was, do women want the man to offer to walk them home? Maybe they don't want him to see where she lives. Maybe if he doesn't offer, he want a gentleman. I mean, these are all kind of like, right, like the do's and don'ts of first dates. And I don't even know if everyone has their own take on this. There's no necessarily one clear answer, but I think that's why you can offer, don't insist. If she says no, it might be a flag. She doesn't want you walking her home for whatever reason. Maybe she's not romantically.
Permission-based.
What's that?
We use it in sales, and it could be working in relationships and dating too. Like, can I kiss you or can I hug you?
Yeah. And I think even though the end of the date thing is I think saying, happy to walk you home or wait for her to get into an Uber. I think women don't like when the guy just says bye and walks away and, they're left on the corner. And it doesn't happen often, but I can tell you it's happened. And I'm thinking, what are these men thinking? Even sometimes when they're interested in the woman. But that doesn't show like a kind of protective, caretaking energy from you, right? That you want to make sure that she gets home safely. And I'm sure she will, But when you just leave her, at the spot and go about your own way, it kind of shows you're in your own world and not really paying attention to her needs. I mean, so those are some of the things that, that I talk about with my clients as far as do's and don'ts that you may or may not be aware of that you're doing that send messages.
Well, this is a sensitive playground because sometimes, oftentimes women want an alpha male, someone who is decisive. But with everything that's going on in the world right now, it seems like men might be intimidated of being too decisive, So maybe I'm not sure I want to get into this too much, but do you, over the years, have you noticed that women don't want men to pay for them, or started, having doubts about this on the first date? These sensitive areas that make men a man, quote unquote, with women and the feminine, all the movement that we got in the world. Maybe you can give me some of your thoughts.
Okay, this is a sensitive topic and it's tricky, but to answer your question, have I found that women don't want for men to pay for them? The answer is no. The answer is no, especially on a first date. That's reality. I think for a first date, even though it's, 2024, there is a little bit of a sense of old-fashioned dating and romantic. I think if you're going Dutch, it's not really romantic, right? I think it's nice maybe in the beginning, the man treats once or twice, then the woman picks up, at some point. Or they go for dinner, they wait for drinks, she gets the drinks, then the guy gets the dinner. I know we're in a, kind of, I don't know, I don't say terra incognita, but, there's an unknown, that society has changed in the last few decades, right? But still, I think women still want to feel, I don't know, like romance and feel like there's dating. This isn't work. It isn't friendship. So I think in that regard, I think those kind of old, at least in my network, those kind of old fashioned rules apply as far as unwritten rules. That the first date, it's going to be the gentleman's treat. He invited her out. I think in rules of etiquette, right? Whoever does the inviting, they treat. In my instance, I'm setting them up, but we kind of position it as if the man is taking her out, and it's just drinks for my setups anyway. It's just drinks. Ultimately, they go to dinner if they're hitting it off, and usually, day two, I think, is on the guy. But at some point, I tell women it's important to reciprocate. I had a guy tell me once that he went out with someone, I don't know, 6 months, and she never even bought a pack of gum in his presence, for herself. She's invited him to pay for everything. And that was a big turnoff to him. But what I think is interesting about this alpha male thing is, I think women still want the guy to kind of take the lead in the dates. And that is one of the biggest kind of complaints I hear from women about just even initiating the date, is that when the guy doesn't have a plan. Because even though, yes, we're talking about where we are in society and, feminists and things that we're on equal footing, and none of that is negated, in my opinion, by, in this very specific area of relationships, the guy kind of taking the lead for the first date. I can tell you, women, for better, they want the guy to have a plan. Hey, what are you doing Thursday? How is this time? Would this spot work for you? And not leaving it to the last minute. It is very unattractive to the women when they don't know what they're doing, like day of, right? And that doesn't happen with my setups because I know.
So a man should know where, when, or like everything planned out, because it speaks to a man's decisiveness and his power in a way, right? He's not wandering. He knows what he wants.
His decisiveness and effort. I think there's two prongs here. One is if you show that you're thinking of a spot, ideally that's convenient for her or mutually convenient, not, around the corner for him and she's trekking across town. That tells you something. But, I think when it shows he's giving it thought and he has a plan, it shows he's excited and he's putting effort into this. And two, yes, it's like a little bit take charge. And for better or worse, I have women who have very, demanding jobs. They're very thriving in their workplace. And they said, I'm kind of in control during the day in my workplace. And I kind of want with dating, like for someone to take charge and make the plan. And if some guys may say, I'm not down for that, and that's fine. But I will tell you, a lot of the women I know, they want that. They want the guy to put in some effort, make a plan. If by the night before the guy hasn't confirmed what they're doing and when, I mean, they're half checked out already. And if they go in the date, I will tell you guys, there's already a little bit of a frustration now in the energy because you didn't, put in that effort. You didn't let them know, when are we meeting? If they have to reach out and say, hey, are we still on for tomorrow? Where are we going? You're already behind 8 ball a little bit. So I would offer that advice to guys. Yes, there's still that desire for the women for you to just be proactive and have a plan. At the same time, you raised a really great question about, I think it's challenging for men now. Women want an alpha male, but they also want someone who's in touch with their emotions and communicative and not too, toxic masculinity. And where's the balance? And that's definitely for another podcast because that's a whole can of worms. But, yeah, a good topic for future days.
Let's wrap things up. What would you like to say as we end this episode? Maybe you can give your definition of love, because love is in the air, and it's not only in the air on 14th of February, should be in the air every single day. So what is love for you? And any last word that you want to leave our viewers and listeners with?
Sure. I'd love to offer some advice as I wrap up, just so that people might listen to this and think, what can they do to increase their chances of finding love? Obviously, hiring a matchmaker is one possibility, but that's not always for everyone. And there's many other things you can do to be proactive. So I'll start with that, and then I'll address, what is love. I think, as far as advice I want to give for anyone listening who feels frustrated in not meeting their right matches, I would say shake things up. I think whatever you're doing, maybe it's not working for you, so try something different. If you're relying entirely online, get out in the real world, be social, pick a few things to do, and just put out good, positive energy to attract people to you. Smile, let them know you're open to engaging in a conversation. Be thoughtful about where you're going to go and do what you're going to do and be social. Is it the right crowd, the right demographic, the right age for you? But I would say don't rely exclusively on apps. I think people have gone kind of lazy with that, and they're just not going out into the real world where all those potentially, wonderful matches could be. I think if you're on the apps, shake up what you're doing on the apps. Maybe refresh your pictures. Put some new pictures out there that are current and accurate that will get someone's attention. Change up your answers to the questions. Change up your search parameters. Maybe, move the age range a little bit, move the height thing, move whatever. Give yourself the chance to increase a larger pool of people on the apps. Spread the word to people who who love you, and maybe they don't know that you're really ready to get out there and date again, and maybe they know somebody. So I think not in a desperate, way, but in a very organic, sweet way. Tell your hairdresser, tell your whomever, hey, my resolution for this year, we're still only in February, is to meet somebody great, and not be afraid or embarrassed to say that. It's the most basic need to want companionship in your life and love. So I think just think about what you're doing and think about what you can do differently in this new year. And as far as what is love, God, that is something, I don't know, philosophers over the centuries have tried to give a good definition. So I don't know if I'm going to have any more success. But I think for me and what I see, I think love is really being there for your partner through this journey of life on many levels. Love in a romantic way. Clearly, you have to have that. In a friendship way, that when both parties at some point are going to struggle, maybe with work, something's not ideal, or they're fighting with their, who knows what, their sibling or whatever life throws at you. Friends, you're navigating current events, the world events that affect you as a couple, that you are there for each other when they're vulnerable, when they need someone to help them get through something, that you are that rock for them that they can rely on. I think love is, and I honestly, being married, and any married couple will tell you, love is understanding and forgiving, and on both ends. No one is perfect. And so someone once said the key to a happy marriage is a short memory or something. And I thought that could be true, right? You can hold on to grievances, you can hold on to things, or you can focus on all the wonderful things that your partner has done and continues to do for you, and be grateful. I think love is gratitude. And I think it's a perspective you realize as you get older. Love is not just butterflies, right? And that's great. But your love morphs into something even deeper with this shared experience. And I think if you ask couples in their 80s, married 50 years, what they would tell you, I think they'd say something similar. It's profound and it's something you build together.
Thank you so much, Marni. Thank you for inspiration. Thank you for everything. And that was Marni Kagan, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed being on your program and wishing everyone a year full of love ahead.
If you want to catch our podcast episodes in video format, head over to the description. You'll find the link to my YouTube channel, TikTok, and Instagram. Until the next time, take care of yourself and take care of others.